Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello and welcome back. Todd Taskey here with the Second Bite Podcast. So happy that you could join us. Today, I am really excited. Matt Wilson from Eastport Holdings is with us and brings a really unique perspective because Matt built an agency, sold it. Part of his responsibility in his new agency is to acquire businesses. So we're going to get a really, really neat picture of this whole Second Bite podcast. We're going to get a really interesting picture of the whole Second Bite process from Matt. Matt, I am super happy to have you on board. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for hooking me up.
Hey, before we get started, I want to take just a minute and thank the people at EOS Worldwide. Not sure if you're familiar with them, Matt, but they are an entrepreneurial operating system, EOS.
Yes.
They have tons of tools for entrepreneurs. They also have a tremendous easy button for slightly larger businesses that want somebody to come in and help implement the systems that will grow a business, make it more fun to enjoy, make it more profitable to own, on and on from that standpoint. I've had a bunch of guys on the podcast that just literally swear by it and rave about it. And we're honored and thrilled to have them as our sponsor. So anybody that wants to get more information on EOS, you can go to eosworldwide.com and you can learn more. And again, we're big fans of them. So with that, Matt, thank you for joining. As I said, I want to get into all the things that I just described. So let's take it a bite at a time if we can. You are with Eastport Holdings. So tell me what Eastport Holdings is, and then we'll work a little way backwards and kind of go through your history, and then we'll go forward.
Sure. We're a database based business. We've got marketing solutions. We have 4 companies basically for the portfolio. We have performance marketing agency group. We have a media activation group. We have a content group, which is where the puck is going in our business, and digital experience. And we've got over 535 clients spread amongst the agency network. We range between $25 and $32 million in EBITDA overall. I'll have to give you a range, or my owners will tell me.
That's great. Yeah, thanks.
And the story arc for Eastport as a whole, 11 years ago, started out as sort of a Moneyball story. We looked for underappreciated assets that were high performing. So in what I would call flyover states, these would be ad agencies that every client had to fly over New York and Chicago and Los Angeles to get to these agencies and give them national business. So that told us that they could compete on a national level. Plus, it created a great value mechanism for us if we were chasing, the delta or the beta. Our second phase was to add bigger companies, point solutions, full service agencies in bigger markets. And what that allowed us to do was to drive those services into those charter agencies. So those charter agencies wouldn't have to, create or build or buy their own services. So it was a great cross-selling model. And now we've been able to merge all of these entities. I think we've done 20 acquisitions since we started this. And we've driven them into a pure play, database, performance-based marketing group, a media activation group, and a digital experience group.
So that's tremendous. And we're going to dig into that. But you were an agency guy, right? For 20 years, you ran SBC. Tell me about that, and tell me about how your first, transaction with Eastport went.
Sure. Yeah, I was a military brat, traveled all over the world. I worked for the government out of school, then jumped to Marriott, where I was an analyst on what is now the Bonvoy program, their honor guest program, I think it was called at the time. Then spent 10 years at J. Walter Thompson. So I really started learning the advertising business under Sir Martin Sorrell. I was a weed at the time. I didn't work for him. I didn't even see him. Yeah. But I watched the influence that he had when he was doing his build and buy strategy. And at that time, right at the end of it, I couldn't puncture the glass ceiling at J. Walter Thompson, and I got a lead from a recruiter in Columbus. Never spent any time in Columbus in my life. Company called SBC Advertising. Became a super young GM of this shop, and we blew this thing up into a big retail Midwestern giant. Columbus is known for retail. And about that time, guys from Eastport started calling, saying, "Hey, let's take over your media. We'll write you a check every month, and we'll do your media." We're like, "No, don't really want to do that."
Was Eastport anything at the time?
They had two companies. They had Asher, which was a field service group out of Fort Wayne, was servicing the subway business. And they had Ad Staff, which was just a media company.
Yeah.
And we sort of worked out the idea of why don't we go do this and build something? So we were one of the first charter agencies into Eastport. And when we looked at it at that time, this is what a lot of entrepreneurs and owners have. They don't really have a way to monetize their business and monetize the investment and the equity chips that they've got on the table. You could sell it to your employees, but a lot of times they can't come up with the bucks to do it. You could just wait around like a lot of agency people have done until you're 80 and it just goes out of business.
Right.
You could do an ESOP. That's problematic in itself. But this was a way that we figured out to take some risk chips off the table, monetize our investment, and then work it out.
Now, at SBC, you were not a founder, but you were there 20 years and you were the general manager. Did you have any equity in the business then?
What we did with the owner, and there were two other partners at SBC Advertising. It was Neil Wiedershine and Dave Dennis. Dave was our finance chief, and Neil was our creative chief. So I was on the client service side. And what we did was we converted for a long time all of our bonuses into equity chips, equity points. And at the end, it hit a threshold where we bought the remaining 100%. I think it was 30% left over for 100% of the business. So we had split it down third, a third, a third. Not exactly an ideal way to run a business. I still think there should be a leader. But it's like ZZ Top, three guys against the world.
Yeah, you'll figure it out, right?
Right.
And so then did SBC was acquired by Eastport.
Right.
But on your LinkedIn, I also see 500 degrees. Where did that come in?
Yeah, good question. So I was the chief operating officer of SBC Advertising, and I was on a good run. I had a 2-year earnout with Eastport. My thought was, okay, I'm going to get my last bite. Everything's cool. I completed my earnout, and working with the leaders at Eastport, Jeff Presley and Bubba Patton, I pitched them the idea because I kind of had a back pocket client. I pitched the idea of let's start something from scratch that we don't have to buy. Let me go down to Miami. Let me work at Burger King, Tim Hortons, Popeyes. Let me just run the trot line, so to speak, and see if I can't develop a piece of business as well as build an agency model on content, because that's where the puck was going. So we went down there and way more successful than we ever thought it was going to be.
Wow.
And we rolled that into Esports. So it was a company that they didn't have to buy necessarily. I still have equity points in it and I get a distribution out of it. But it was a neat expansion of the experience, because I think you're right. Everything I've heard, as I talk with you, it's about you have this one idea of what's going to happen when you sell your agency and where you're going to go. What I always tell owners and entrepreneurs is when they say, "What's it like to do it? Tell me the truth, because you're an agency owner and you run a holdco. You're both sides of
the story. You're right."
And I tell them it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. So all of the horror stories and dark clouds, it's never as bad, because you cannot get bank loans, mezz financing. You can't get all of that structure if it's a crappy idea.
Right.
It'll never be as good as you want it to be, which is I still want to make more money. After you make that first bit of money, you're going, I should be making 4, 5, 6 times more. I'm more valuable. The deal that I tell them is it's just going to be different, and prepare yourself and to have doors open for you. And if you're open for it, that works.
So I want to explore Eastport a second, because I think it's fascinating. And So I want to talk about the reasons for why you decided at SBC that it was time. Either we wanted the money, or we got to be bigger, or we need more resources. What was the real driver to do a transaction? And then we'll talk about Eastport in a bit.
Sure. First, we had developed early, I would say, early leads on digital transformation. So we had built out inside of our shop an interactive company to service our interactive needs. This was the early days when, you couldn't find a developer, to save your life. And we figured it out. We also figured out programmatic media. And when Eastport came to us, they said, look, you're a great asset. You guys have great clients, but you also have two things that we can spin off and service everything else. So that was kind of intriguing to be able to have a business unit that could now go out and service other groups. We thought that it was going to be, 4 years, and then we're going to go retire up to the mountains and drive Range Rovers. And the deal is, if you're a worker and a grinder, you never lose that spirit and imagination to go out and do new things. We thought it was time. We had ground ourselves into making this thing a machine. We had a great second set of leaders. And we just said, this is new to us. This is going to be a different bite of the apple. It's not about money. It's also about expanding your, what you can do. I'm a completely different executive now than I ever was. I've never would have imagined being able to do the things that I'm doing.
That's great. So, it's interesting. I did an episode with Michael Quinn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I know you know that name. For listeners that don't, it's Quint. And if you go to secondbitepodcast.com and you put in his name, or you can Google Mike Quinn podcast, Michael, because we helped Michael do his transaction with Eastport almost 4 years ago. And Michael said to me, we're going to do a transaction, much like you said. I'm going to stay for 1 year, and then I'm going to go do something else. Right? That was almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in October. And on the podcast, he told me he just signed a 2-year extension on his employment agreement. So I think you and Michael, and I would imagine others in the network, would be testimony to that. But what do you think it is about Eastport that would let a guy, they just bought his company, go build something else from scratch, that would have a guy with the talent that Michael Quinn has want to stay longer than is necessary? What do you attribute that to?
I think the model that we've got is sort of a meritocracy and not an aristocracy. We are very small at the holdco leadership level, very small. There are some holdcos that have, they build back $25 million in sort of a franchise fee every year, and they've got 30 to 50 people. That's what MDC Stagwell has. And by having a very slim management team and having entrepreneurs, both Bubba and Jeff have started companies before. They're still in the business. They'll go out and they'll buy, 5-guy franchises and go into investment groups, and they'll build roll-ups for trucking and logistics companies. They have a mind for entrepreneurialism, and they can smell a pretty good idea a mile away. They're like sharks in the water, good sharks, not bad sharks. So they would recognize in Michael, all right, Michael, you've got other skills than what you've brought to this table. Build your management team below you. Keep giving us the 5X that you promised. And you have a different vision for the future. A lot of these guys are super young, super bright, smarter than I am. And their script isn't written yet.
So you use the word in the agency network. So, nobody likes to use the word holdco.
Right.
And you guys are, I guess technically maybe you are, but you're a lot more than that. Could you talk about the construct and how you get the companies to work well together? Because I know, again, from Michael's episode, how well he believes that the companies interact together and trade clients and business and the rest.
Yeah, it's a really good complementary, not a competitive group. It's a house of brands, basically. The initial idea was want every agency to be able to go after multiple categories. I want agency A to have a QSR and agency B to have a QSR. Classic holding company kind of methodology. When we go to our plans, we tell our groups it's reasonable to assume that a company can grow 9% year over year. But we're going to give you another tool to grow. So you're going to have client retention and renewals. You're going to have organic growth on top of that. You're going to have new business go out and get. But you're going to have cross-selling, which means that if you have a capability that another agency in the network needs in order to sell a client, you plug in, you get some kind of arbitrage off of that deal. It could be a commission if you walk away. It could be an hours and a rev share if you stay in with it. And we've had marvelous success with it. It took 18 months to get it up and running, and it works. It's fueled by trust. Nobody wants to bring in another agency or another person that's going to screw up their client. So we've managed the trust process.
And so as you guys think about your continued growth, I assume you'll continue to do acquisitions. Will you be opportunistic if something drops in your lap and it fits right? Or do you have a pretty specific target of other capabilities that the network needs to have?
We very targeted in what we want to add on. We don't want duplicitous services. We don't want to just add another digital experience company. What we really want to find now, where the puck is going, is very specific point solutions to solve the new technology that the marketing stack or the full funnel lead generation clients are pulling up. And there's so many great companies that are out there. Some are full service, smaller agencies, but they've built studios that have more business and have higher margin on the back end. Other companies have very small point solutions for a very narrow target, let's say law firms, but they've got a product that we can explode and sell and reformulate for everybody else.
And so when you talk about the technology stack or the areas that you're looking for, can you give me a couple of ideas that you think would be, two-part question, interesting for Eastport in the next 6 to 24 months, but that you think will be evolving more in the industry?
The content world is a great growth mechanism to not only we've got a great content shop, but content is the ability to create either film, video, digital assets, explode them on all the channels. The media plans that clients are activating right now, either from us or that we have to fulfill, are so complex and so hungry for perishable images, video images, that if we have another two companies, one that can be a field film group, bring back the film, and another is an edit suite, another is going to be a specialty company that can do TikTok videos and short form videos. Short form videos are big right now. No one sends PowerPoint around to your clients anymore. You send videos.
So let's talk about that for a second. You want to be able to capture TikTok video, right? That makes sense. A lot of that, people have online elsewhere. Do you guys internally have the capability to build campaigns around TikTok, or are you considering looking to acquire that skill set? Somebody that knows how to take that data, right, and that content and deliver it to the customers in a way that'll help them get clients.
Yeah, there's when you look at that channel specifically, there's a number of ways to exploit it. One, we can plan on that platform. That's good. B, the influencers that are on TikTok. And when you think influencers, you have to forget about Kim Kardashian. You have to just think about people that are trusted authorities in their space, working out, fashion, what have you. Third is the ability for people to edit. So capture it, edit, make it fun. And that's hard. You can do the mechanics, but to have the clever idea that goes into it, that's the piece that's interesting. And TikTok is also a client of ours.
Got it. What are your, just as a side question, your thoughts on influencers, particularly micro influencers that are harder perhaps to get them together and scale, but might have more influence over their followers.
Yeah, and when I talk about the anti-Kardashian model, because those are, it's $1 million a throw, basically.
Right.
You have to understand the power that influencers have. It's not because of necessarily their celebrity, it's the trust factor. If you take a look at the millennial strike and below, they trust people in their own generation as authorities and will drive to brands and accept brands more on their recommendation versus traditional advertising.
And so do you guys currently deliver and provide that, or that's something that's where the puck is going, as you said?
Oh, yeah, we're doing it right now. And in fact, we're finding that a great area is in business to business influencers. So whether or not it's Naval Ravikant, who I think is the Descartes of business, and Elad Gills, Mark Anderson, these guys have tremendous power to influence somebody's ability to buy a digital platform from you or go down. Let's say it's an EOS thing. If I saw a video from Elad Gills or Naval Ravikant that talked about EOS planning as the next wave,
you'd go look it up.
I'd have to go look it up. So it's a way to sneak in the product or the service, on the back of someone else's credibility. Oldest game in the book, but you can see how influence can work on big scale platforms of B2B. Consumer works as well.
Yeah, I think Joe Rogan's making a couple bucks doing exactly that.
Just a few.
Just these days. Yeah, right. So let's go back then, if we can, because a lot of the folks that listen to this podcast are thinking about a transaction. It might be a few years out, it might be a couple months out. Now that you've been the seller, and now that you're more the buyer, what are the things you wish you would have known when you were the seller that you would provide as input or advice for anybody listening?
Yeah, great question. One, you really need to spend some time and understand the language of this business, because the language of a transaction is legal, it's deep, and it's confusing. So when people talk about a pipeline, your definition of a pipeline may be completely different than, a PE firm's pipeline. So I would spend some time, and you can, if you get the High Growth Handbook, it's my favorite book.
The High Growth Handbook.
You got it, Elad Gills. You can get it hardback on Amazon. It's a great handbook because it's the people that have started dozens of companies. So they know from startup to financing to selling to add-ons, they know the path. And it's filled with all the language that you have to understand when you get into this. So understand the language. With a great broker, obviously somebody's going to feed you that information, but I think it's worthwhile to do some research up front. Second of all, I think the biggest move anybody can make as an entrepreneur that's considering selling is to understand how to not make this a gigantic distraction. Do the work up front. You're going to have to show an EBITDA trend. You have to know, first of all, what an EBITDA is, but you have to show a trend. You have to do the banking. You have to build your story. Everybody already thinks they have their story because they have a website and they have a PowerPoint deck that shows credentials. Get an example from somebody in terms of what they call a CIM, which would be the confidential information memorandum. That's what is used as a tool to go out and market your company. Go through it and understand it and do everything in it. Do everything in your power to find the data that's going to go into that book. Try to do that up front while you're thinking about it. While you're wondering how can I take the equity chips off the table and I want to, go buy a Tesla. If you want to really do that, you got to figure it out and learn from the masters.
One of the things I tell folks a lot is, and I'd like to hear your comment on this, in the transactions that we do, Matt, are usually 1 to 4 million of EBITDA. Consider the lower middle market. That's our sweet spot.
Sure.
And one of the things that we tell buyers all the time is that we can make the transaction easy. I find that the buyers never believe that to be true because there's no such thing as an easy transaction.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember back to Blue Text, which was Michael Quinn's company.
Right.
But we use the people at Cohen. Don has been on the podcast. He's talked about the accounting of deal accounting and the rest. And I'm a strong believer that if you can deliver really buttoned down GAAP and accrual-based financials for the last 4 years and probably for the future 1 or 2, you send a really strong message to the buyer that we have our act together. Maybe even more so than a 50-page SIM. Could you comment on that? And if you think that's true and what you think is more important?
Yeah, I think it's rather natural for an entrepreneur or somebody who's considering selling their business to already have sort of the elevator story and, the market conditions that are favorable to your business are going to last for the next 3 years. You've already got the elevator story down pat. If you speak the language of buttoned up, boiled in the wool, MBA finance guys, it immediately bonds you to that personality type. And there are a number of personality types in this business, and you just have to, on the finance side, you have to adapt the personality and the numbers and the language of those people that are interested in your business. They may not even care what business you're in. They may just be looking at the number, and they may, increasingly make it super important to you in terms of here's an additional bonus, here's an additional accrual, here's a car, whatever it is. You just have to speak their language.
And this might seem a little self-serving. How do you think about a company that reaches out to you directly versus somebody that's represented by a banker?
Yeah, I it's good because I've seen them all. I've looked at all different inquiries. The ones that aren't represented by a business leader, like a banker or a broker, what have you. You have to spend a lot of time training the person that's interested in, merging with your business. And we don't have that time. We want to be able to analyze an opportunity off of a cloaked, 2-pager. And we want to get into the business quickly, do an audit. All of that takes time. We just don't have time in our day, unless the guy's super buttoned up, but it's rare that happens.
When you think about your next acquisitions, I'm coming back a little bit from an earlier question. Do you have a guesstimate about what that will be in terms of service line offering?
Yeah. So if we take a look at there's about 6 stripes that we're looking at. One is going to be on digital experience. So digital experience is a fancy term that the advertising industry has created for people that can build interactive tools, whether it's an app, a website, a branded social site. The challenge right now is the business has moved past what I call beyond the build. So as we look at what's happening in marketing technology, you have to have strategists and engineers and people that can go deep inside the client's organization, into operations, and into their marketing stack and make this work. That's one. Two is
so just to finish that point, you're well beyond having the capability for web dev. It needs to do a lot more than that.
Right. And web dev, to a certain degree, is a commodity. If you can concentrate on a couple of development platforms, let's say it's Drupal or WordPress, that helps you in the long run because you become an expert at it. So the idea of going beyond the build is super important.
Got it. So that was one. What else?
So we've got media. So media is transitioning, obviously. I think a lot of people's imaginations are fueled by the media, such as, Mel Gibson's movie, What Women Really Want, Bewitched, you name it. Media is much more of a technology play and a data play than it is a media outlet play. There are a few media companies left that are independent, and we would be interested in talking to those that want to join a bigger force, because there are two forces at play right now, and one is scale. There's a company called Horizons Media, who, because of scale, they are literally walking away with almost every pitch. We won a side-by-side competition with them. We're sharing a big opportunity with the Honda Dealers Association. It was a big pitch, but Horizons is a player, and they're showing that they can scale as well as they can go down to local markets now and service clients. So, a media platform we would be interested in. We're interested in content studios or full-service firms that have content studios.
Got it. Now that you spend a lot of your time doing acquisition, what do you think is the most challenging part of due diligence for a seller that that would really be helpful if somebody would have tipped them off a year or so in advance in terms of having the company ready?
Right. So putting my shoes, well, I've been in the shoes, but putting myself in the shoes of a hypothetical seller, one would be, this is on the qualitative side. Softer side is your instincts. You grew a business based on instinct and hard work. I always tell everybody, particularly those that operate underneath me, is to trust your instincts, because sometimes you're not going to have every single shred of information for you to agile your way into a decision. So, if something seems fishy, ask the question and be upfront about it. 2, do not ever filter your thoughts. I think a lot of people in the seller environment are intimidated by this process a bit. They want to act as if they know what's going on and sort of posture into that. I know that seems strange, but I see it all the time. And what happens if you're a seller and you posture into it, and then all of a sudden you realize you didn't understand what a clawback was, or whatever the term is, that's a challenge.
I also find that a lot of sellers find or feel like if they're going to put the deal at risk, if they raise some issues that perhaps are important to them, what salary is going to be, what non-compete's going to be, what they're really going to do post-close, all those kind of things. And that is the reason why so many deals go poorly afterwards. And I remember, again, with Blue Text, you guys spent a ton of time talking, because there was 4 partners at Blue Text, to Michael and his other 3 partners about, what do you guys really want to do? How are you going to get there? How can we help you? What do you, all those kind of things. So I think you guys do a particularly good job of doing that, so that guys vocalize when they're in the process. What about in advance of the process? Is there anything people could be doing to, quote unquote, prepare?
Yeah, I think, we talked about getting the numbers in the portfolio together. That is going to be not plug and play, but like 90% there. I think you got to do your homework first. You have to this is your biggest opportunity. You have to do your min-max math. And I've heard you on the podcast talk to a number of people about it, and we certainly were there as well, in terms of, all right, so if the first bite is the only bite I get, this shows you the realistic paranoia of sellers. If it's the first bite I get and I don't get anything else, well, I'm going to be okay. Work through that and totally understand. Contracts are there. And if the holdco and the acquirer is backed by a bank and by a credit-worthy audited holding company, I think you're going to be in good shape for them to make good on their promises. They want to make good on their promises because they're probably paying you dollars for that second bite in their preferred payment. So they want to get off that 8-9%, advantage.
Exactly. What is your opinion on this? There'll be times when I'll talk to an entrepreneur and they're like, we haven't spent any time getting ready for a transaction. We're just not ready. And I think what they mean in terms of their financials. And one of the messages I always deliver is, a buyer understands where you've been making investments in the business. They understand that all three of you have company cars. They understand that you might have done this to help you pay a lower amount in taxes last year versus this year. When you see stuff like that, does it seem like it's normal activity, or does it make you concerned or alarmed?
Me as an acquirer to somebody that I'm investigating
Yeah.
the way we look at it is entrepreneurs do two things really well. If they're successful and they're going to be a target, one of them, they've built a great business. They found a niche, they're fulfilling it. Two, they figured out all the small business mechanisms to provide cookie jars and ways to build a tax advantaged estate, inclusive of owning real estate. We love all of that. And up front, what we'll do is we'll talk to them of usually, let's say if the guy owns the building, which is becoming increasingly irrelevant now in today's pandemic world and variant world, we'll co-sign a lease with them. We'll just say, look, we're going to guarantee your lease. We're going to have a place for these guys to live. Let's
Right.
do that. Same thing for cars and whatever. Sometimes we'll wipe out a lot of the cookie jars and just sort of like, we can't track 17 cars across the system. Let's just give you a lump sum, and you can do whatever you want with that money, but we'll make it right. We're not in the business of going in and stripping away this guy's wealth mechanism.
Yeah, that's what we did at Eastport. So let me kind of bring us in on time here for
Yeah.
our conversation. So you've been at Eastport now closing in on 6 years.
Right.
And your second bite is still out there. Is it going to be as big as you anticipated? Is it going to be bigger? Did it take longer? Is it going faster? Based on what you thought when you did that first transaction 6 years ago almost, where do you think you are?
So if I walk back real quick, with SBC, got the first tranche earned out, got paid out. Started another company, rolled it into Eastport, converted that into, instead of hey, I'm going to have 25% of the earnings, into equity. So, and there are only like 6 equity holders at Eastport. And when we take a look at the next transaction, if there is, and I would tell everybody, every business is built to turn, and every entrepreneur should think that you're building a business to turn it. Same thing with larger holdcos. We would only look at an opportunity where somebody can come in with broad shoulders and say, we like your niche position. You're between those small agencies that are going to be weeded out and the ad cartels that are, viciously turning their battleships around in the Mississippi. We want to double your EBITDA in a, massive acquisition spree in 3 to 5 years. I haven't done the number yet. I know what my equity position is. And I just haven't done the number because I'm involved in the work day to day. I don't believe it until somebody comes in with a great suitor and an offer. But then there's another bite. So if you really think about this, you can turn as long as you're focused on creating, a sustainable business and not just in it for the dough.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've got 2 guys that come to mind that have done a transaction, bite one. They didn't sell in for the second bite, but they recapitalized the business, took a bunch of money off the table, and they have done it a third time. So there's many ways to get payouts and to still continue at what you're doing, as an alternative method to simply selling the business and exiting.
Right.
Let me end with this if I can, because I know that you have been very successful, not only in your business life, but in your personal life. Is there anything that you could point to, whether it be a book like the one you referenced earlier, an experience, or a person that's had a lasting impact on your professional life that you would want to shout out to, or that you would want to recognize or recommend?
Sure. There's a number of influences From a book point of view, we talked about the High Growth Handbook. The Mask of Command by John Kagan is awesome.
The Mask of Command.
A Mask of Command, like the Mask of Zorro. But what it does is gives you an idea of what it takes to be a true leader, and the fact that leaders influence. That's what leaders do. When you cease to influence, you are not a leader. You're just a bureaucrat. My dad gave me that book. He was the commander of the naval forces in Vietnam, and during the withdrawal. And he said it was a horrible time to be a warrior because you're in drawdown mode. And he always said, when it hits the fan, you put on a helmet, you spray the bushes with buckshot, and you haul ass. And fathers and sons always have just weird relationships just in general, and you never really appreciate the old man, and until you have some perspective and he's gone. I think early on in my career too, I went through everything. I went through the Tony Robbins sessions. I was a weed at J. Walter Thompson. Everybody was smarter than me at that time. I did the firewalking. I fell for all of it. I still think it's great. It's not for me anymore, because right now I'm involved in something called Supra, SUPRA, Human. It's run by John Madsen, who's a former NFL tight end. It's an incredible physical, mental subscription on your app. And, it's all about diet. It's all about mental acuity. And it's all about working out and having the physique of a leader. Not that I'm a narcissist or anything, but I believe if you're going to do what we have to do as leaders, you got to be on point. And then the last part is meditation. Transcendental meditation, for sure, has been able to calm the voices of fear and paranoia and self-doubt, and let you settle into being a good father, a good grandfather. We're going to have twins on Monday for my daughter.
Congratulations.
But that helps. It really absolutely helps. And John Manson backs it up as well.
Well, I will say this. It is very generous of you to share the fact. I think regardless of where we get to in our lives, there's always doubt and fear and insecurity. And I think the more that people at levels like yours can share the fact that, that it's part of your daily walk or weekly walk, it makes it just a little bit easier for everybody else. So I thank you for that honesty. I thank you. There's a bunch of things I didn't even get to in here because we had such a great conversation. It was really enlightening. It'll be very, very interesting to watch how Eastport continues to grow and whatever chapters that you guys write next there. So congratulations on your continued success. And
appreciate
thank you so much, Matt, for making time to be with us on
anytime, Todd. I really appreciate your time.
It was terrific. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.